Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte, and once again, we are here live at the Build Studio in New York City. My next guest is a graphic designer by day and a New York Times best-selling author by night. Back in 2012, her book, Wonder, inspired people across the globe to choose kind. The story of Augie Pullman resonated with fans young and old the world over, sparked the Choose Kind movement, and most recently enjoyed a successful theatrical run, as well as received an Academy Award nomination for Best Makeup. Yeah, let's applaud for that, of course. This fantastic movie about a remarkable boy finds its way on a DVD and Blu-ray tomorrow. So we're super lucky to have here with us today to talk about Wonder, the book, the film, and her incredible journey. The great R.J. Palacio is here. Make some noise, please. That's fantastic, right? So excited. Before we get started, though, I believe we have the trailer for the flick, so we're going to take a look at that. Luke, let's go ahead and run that clip.
My name is Augie Pullman.
If they stare, let them stare. You're the toughest kid in that school.
I know you don't always like it, but I love it. It's my son's face.
You are not ugly, Augie.
You just say that because you're my mom.
Because I'm your mom, it counts the most, because I know you the most.
We all deserve a standing ovation, at least once in our lives. My friends do. My teachers do. My sister does for always being there for me. My dad does for always making us laugh. And my mom does the most for never giving up on anything, especially me.
You really are a wonder, Augie.
Ladies and gentlemen, please, R.J. Palacio, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This movie, this story, this book, I'm excited to talk to you about the whole thing and get into it and go on a real deep dive here. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
On everything.
Yeah.
But before we get to any of that, a couple of things. First of all, how are you? How are you doing, R.J.?
I'm great. I'm thrilled to be here. You know, I went to the new school not too far away from here, so Parsons.
Grounds.
I know, exactly. So this is great.
Does that trailer still, after all this time, you still get a little bit of a chill? You
It
see
does.
the swelling of the music and all those beautiful
I
moments?
still get teary-eyed just watching the trailer and just remembering. I mean, it's been such a long road to get to that point, and then to see the trailer, to be in the movies, like when we would go to the movies and actually see it with a live audience. It's a really surreal experience.
How many times did you get an opportunity to do that, to see it with an audience? To how many?
Probably about a dozen times from beginning to end, starting with just right before the movie released, and then the premiere, which was really exciting. Because I'm a writer. I'm from New York. I don't know Hollywood. I don't know movies. And so suddenly to be on a red carpet with real movie stars, it's crazy.
I mean, not just real, like legit movies.
No, legit.
You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I mean,
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts is
Owen
about
Wilson, no slouch himself, but Julia Roberts.
Completely, that's exactly right. So I would find myself talking to Julia Roberts and just, sort of like hanging out with her. And then there would be a little voice inside of me that would be thinking, oh my God, you're talking to Julia Roberts. It was amazing. And she's so nice. And she's
pretty amazing. Also, too, as an author, as a writer, you never really get an opportunity to kind of sit there while somebody reacts to the book, right? You always hear about it after the fact. So it must have been an interesting process for you to be there during the film and watch it happen like in real time.
That's really phenomenal, because to have people, you see them kind of sniffling or crying or laughing. That was really fun too, to see people actually like, oh, they're laughing at that joke, which I remember like arguing with the director. So I don't think that's a good joke, but he kept it in there, and he was right like 10 out of 10 times.
There's a lot of stuff in there I do plan on getting to and going deeper on. But before we get to any of that, I do want to talk about your story and your journey as a whole. As a designer, like you said, you went to Parsons, you went to school here, you were art director for years. You did. I read thousands of book covers.
Yeah.
When did you start to explore your creativity as a writer as well?
I think there were two, when you're 18 or 19 years old and you're thinking about what you want to do for a living in terms of making money, there were two things I thought I was pretty good at, or I could make a living at. One was drawing and painting and being an illustrator, and the other was writing. And at a certain point I realized that writing for me was more precious And so in a way, I didn't want to make that what I made a living out of. I wanted to have it just to be my little sacred thing. But I knew I could make a living as an illustrator. I was pretty confident that I could make a living as an artist or a graphic designer or something. So that's why I ended up going down that avenue. But I was writing always on my own. I would write at night. I would, I have at least half a dozen half-started novels, and outlines for books and stories. And so I've been developing the craft of writing for my whole life. It was just, I think Wonder came about at a time when I was ready to actually write it.
You talk about how writing was more precious for you, and you weren't necessarily trying to make a living off of it, and you were just enjoying that process. Do you remember a moment where that switch flipped, and you were like, you know what, maybe not necessarily make a living off of it, but this thing that was so precious, other people could benefit from these stories. Other people should read these stories.
Well, I think one of the reasons that I was motivated to finish Wonder, as opposed to all the other half dozen, that I never really got around to finish is, what does happen to you as you have a life, and I got married and I have kids, and I had a full-time job as an art director. Finding that precious time to be able to actually devote to writing becomes really hard. And one of the reasons I never actually got around to sort of finishing any of those other novels was because I just didn't have the time. With Wonder, it was the first time, though, that having started it, I felt absolutely compelled to finish it because I knew that if I didn't finish, no one else would get to meet these people that I was sort of, that were born out of my head, but I just felt such genuine affection for in the world that I'd created in a way. I wanted other people to meet Augie Pullman. I wanted other people to sort of experience what I was experiencing because I really enjoyed the writing process, even though because I had a full-time job, the only time that I could find to write every day was in the middle of the night. I would put my younger son to bed. He was about 3 years old. And then take a little nap, and then wake up at and I would write every night for about 1.5 years from midnight to 3 a.m. Because that was the only quiet time. Anyone who has kids, you kind of know that. There's never a quiet time. Yeah, so that's when I would write.
That's pretty wild. Do you think? Because I read the sort of impetus for this story was a real world interaction that you and your son at the time had at an ice cream shop,
right? Which
you kind of sort of
allude to in
the in the movie, right? Do you think do you know that for a fact that sort of moment was what kind of crystallized for you that this particular project was one you were going to finish because you had something that you could look at and say that's when I was inspired and I'm doing it for that person and I'm doing it because of that experience because I want my child to see the world this way. Was that something that pushed you forward, that got you to work between 12 and 3 a.m.?
Yeah, it started out that way. I mean, it started out with my thinking, I think there's a really good story here, and I think I can write it, and so you start out with that idea that I'm a storyteller at heart, and I have this story to tell, and this is a story that I think is worth telling. At a certain point, though, because my older son had just finished 5th grade, and I had just watched sort of the entry into middle school, which as a parent, it's kind of, it can be really painful. It brings up a lot of old stuff, and I kept on, one of the things that just kind of kept dawning on me as I was watching sort of 5th grade play out, some days it was The Lord of the Flies, and some days it was, really sweet and wonderful, but it does toggle back and forth. But the thing that I kept on remembering is thinking, why aren't they kinder to one another? I mean, I understand that kids don't have to be best friends always, and real life is not like that. But I couldn't get over the fact that these kids that I'd watch grow up sometimes could be so unkind to one another. And then I know that I made a big deal of emphasizing kindness in in my family, with my kids. But I kind of wondered if everyone else was emphasizing kindness as much. And so rather than sort of teach my kids, maybe you shouldn't be so nice to everybody, I thought maybe the thing I can do is write this book and finish this book that might inspire a generation to want to be kinder. Because the whole thing about kindness is you can't mandate it. You can't sort of like program kids to be kind. You can only really inspire it. And the best way to inspire kids is to just tell stories and hope that they see themselves, make those connections, and want to be better human beings.
For sure, and without question, this book has been doing that, and this film has been doing that, the story has been doing that. I'm curious, as a storyteller, you know, as a designer, you tell a story visually, as a writer, you tell a story, you know, with words and through narrative. Have you ever found yourself engaging a similar part of your brain as a writer or as a graphic designer? Are there overlaps in those tool sets at all, in the way in which you approach the work?
Yeah, it's funny because I often think, and I know it's not technically a left brain, right brain thing, but I really enjoyed, I enjoy being able to toggle back and forth. As a matter of fact, I was writing a novel recently and stuff, and the thing about writing is it does require solitude and it does require quiet and all these things. And because it's been such a dramatic year since the election and all of this, I found that I wasn't sort of in the right mindset to turn off Facebook and social media. There's so much going on that I wasn't in the right frame of mind. So I ended up, actually, I've been working on a graphic novel. Because what I found that, okay, I'm drawing again, and it does free me up. Like I can actually, you know, watch the news while drawing, and so it is kind of a free. I like going back and forth. I mean, I worked on a picture book called We're All Wonders, and that was also really freeing for me to go sort of from just writing a novel to being able to draw again and go back and forth. I kind of like having the freedom to do both.
Let's jump ahead a little bit. You write the book. It's 2012. It comes out. At what point do you realize this little story that you told, this book that you wrote, has become or is becoming a phenomenon? When does it hit you that it's catching on?
Yeah.
And that it's like wildfire?
Well, because we didn't think it would be.
Right.
I mean, it was a tiny little book. It wasn't about vampires or, you know, kids fighting each other in an arena or anything. So
at the time was like what it needed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's like if you want to write a bestseller, that's what you would write about.
Arena
And
vampires.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. So yeah, but I knew because I worked in book publishing. I mean, my job was to do book cover designs, and I was an art director. I knew early on because I could read the signs when when you publish books, you come out with an advanced reader's copy before the publication of a book, and that's what you send to reviewers to review the book. And I knew that when the advanced reader copies, when they reprinted it, because there was such a high demand, I thought that was my first indication that, this is catching on. This might be bigger than we all thought. It wasn't until a couple of months after the publication, though, when it hit the New York Times bestseller list, that's when it was like, whoa, this is, you know, and then.
Amazing.
And then I still am waiting for like when it's, I mean, it just keeps going and going.
And then you come to find there's a movement. It's not just the book that's resonating with people. It's inspiring people to take it off the page and put it into action. Do you remember the first time you found out about that? That
was like in May. The book came out February, exactly 6 years ago. Wow. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. It was Valentine's Day. It's been 6 years, yeah. So it was probably in May that I just, everything just started clicking, and we just knew that it was just going to fly.
Okay, all right. So strap in because we're going to fast forward again now. Now it's movie time. All right, they come to you and somebody wants to make a film out of it. When translating or adapting a book to screen. It's difficult because you're at this point going to try to render images that you worked so hard to render in the reader's mind and their imagination, right? And that is all the more powerful here because that means we have to actually see Augie, right? Whereas in the book, he's in our minds, he's in our heads, but here we have to see Augie. That changes things a little bit, and that changes a little bit of how the story is told and how people interpret the story. What were your thoughts on that going in? Were you hesitant to even make a movie?
I was.
Yeah.
I was. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that I was going to make a movie. I spoke to several different people who had different visions, including some people who actually kind of put forward the idea that maybe we wouldn't see Augie at all, which I thought was really wrong. because almost disrespectful to Augie. So it wasn't until I met Todd and David, the producers, and we had a great conversation, and I saw that their vision for what the movie would be very much aligned with my vision of what a movie could be of wonder. I didn't want, I mean, it's funny because, you know, yeah, Julia Roberts is... But at the time, I was like, I don't want a big Hollywood movie. I just, you know, what I kind of envisioned a small indie movie, handheld cameras, you know, just a very, very tiny movie, a very humble movie. And they were completely on board, and that's what we were going to do, and that's where it started. And that's what we started working on. But then, you know, 5 years later, it became bigger and bigger. I mean, it's what I like about it so much is that it still retains a small movie feel to it. It doesn't feel like my biggest fear really was that it would be turned into a schmaltz fest. Because, you know, the book is, you know, admittedly somewhat sentimental. I'm an optimist. You know, it's a feel-good book. And I was afraid that it would become too much of a movie of the week kind of movie, if not done right. So what I loved about what we all sort of really concentrated on doing was keeping the emotion back. It's already such an emotional subject. It's all about, I mean, Steven's big job, Steven the director, Chbosky, was restraint, like making sure that we, you know, because there are a million times you could cry. You don't want to cry. You don't want to be crying throughout an entire movie. So it's being able to toggle back and forth between the humanity, the humor, the bravery, the sadness, you know, and going back and forth. And that's what I thought he did so masterfully, because you're sort of on the edge of your seat the entire time. Sometimes you're kind of wiping tears, and sometimes you're just laughing, you know, and it goes back and forth. And that's the movie I wanted to make.
It does a great job of balancing that tone.
Yeah.
And you know, I was watching all the extras on the Blu-ray this past weekend and kind of taking all the behind the scenes stuff, and I wouldn't say blown away, but I was very much impressed by how involved you were. There was endless footage of you on set working with collaborators. Yeah. Well, I mean, they said quite the opposite, that it was a blessing to have you there to help maintain the integrity of the story. So you're walking around all of these sets. I also read somewhere that I believe your favorite scene in the book is the woods scene. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So here's the question after all of that. Was it surreal for you to be able to physically walk around in these environments, these scenes, these moments, and witness them after having conjured them up in your head? What was that like to see it come alive?
Oh, it was crazy. Because, again, I wrote the book in the middle of the night, sleep deprived many times, half asleep. And I would make decisions. I remember very specifically making decisions about what people's names were and stuff. And, you know, again, it's 2 in the morning, and I was like, oh, Amos. I love the name Amos. So, you know, and then just you know, little decisions that you make along the way. And then 5 years later, you're you know, on a movie set, and there's a young actor who's been cast. And he's playing the part, and then there's someone whose job it is to costume him and think about what he's going to be wearing. And then it's someone else's job to think about what that character would have had in his locker. And, you know, it's this, there's so many people gainfully employed in bringing your vision, sleep deprived as it was, to life. And you know, things like going on the set and, you know, they shot in Vancouver. Now, I had really begged so hard, and I lost. I wanted them to shoot in New York. You know, I live in Park Slope. And the book kind of, you know, the book takes place in a mythical Washington Heights version, which is really Park Slope transferred to Upper Manhattan. And so I wanted them to film in Park Slope, and they said, no, we're going to film in Vancouver for lots of reasons, but don't worry, it's going to look like New York. We made The Martian look like The Martian. You know, we can do it. We can do it. And so when I got to the set and I saw that of course, you can't find a Brooklyn brownstone in Vancouver. They recreated a life-sized brownstone inside a giant warehouse. The stones were made of like styrofoam. It was so perfect. It was like a luxury version of a regular brownstone, but you know, it was like you know, we'd all love to live there. But and it was just like I was thinking, it almost brought me to tears. How many people actually worked on bringing the Pullman residence to life? And then here I was touring it with the production designer, Kalina, and you know, to see artwork on the walls, and then to see even, you know, they had like what was on the refrigerator for the Pullman house. The whole thing is envisioned with such care and precision and imagination and creativity, and you realize that it's all sort of all in the endeavor of just bringing your book to life. It's really mind-blowing. It really is.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
I'm running out of time. I got to go to audience in a second, but there was one thing that I personally couldn't let you leave without asking you. How'd you guys, where the Star Wars thing? One, where does that come from? What was the decision to include the Star Wars references? And two, how did you pull that off and get what sounded like the sound effects and the actual characters?
It was
legit,
Chewbacca.
right? It was the real thing, yeah.
It was a real Chewbacca.
How in the world did you do that?
Well, the Star Wars, everyone thinks that, because I'm the mother of two sons, they got me into Star Wars. It's like, I got them into Star Wars. I mean, I was 13 years old when Star Wars came out. I have been a diehard fan since then. I love Star Wars. Well, up until recently, but... sorry. Yeah, no, don't get me started on that. So I love Star Wars, and I'm a huge fan. And then, of course, my sons, they're really into Star Wars, and not just Star Wars, but the expanded universe, the whole Star Wars. So I know much more than I know a lot. Yeah. So of course, and the book is somewhat based a little. It's kind of based on the people you know, and of course, for me, a 10-year-old boy, would be into Star Wars. So the Star Wars references are throughout the book. And then it turns out that one of the producers, David Hoberman, had worked at Disney and had a really great relationship with Kathleen Kennedy. And he called her up and he said, "Look, and she, I think the way the story goes, maybe it's a little more complicated than this, but the story I've heard is that then she said, "Sure, let me read the book." And she read the book and she realized that it's got such a powerful message and that Star Wars would definitely be fine with being affiliated with Wonder. And suddenly we had Chewbacca on the set. I mean, and that was an amazing day for all the kids, like Jacob Tremblay. For me, yeah. I missed him. I wasn't on the set that day. Oh, I know.
One day you didn't go?
I know. Can you believe that? I know. It's crazy. I missed him, but still.
Well, for Jacob, I'm sure it was cool.
It was great. It was like the greatest day for them. So it was pretty good.
That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And that's not to suggest that I would ever think that the fine folks over at Disney or Star Wars wouldn't want to be associated with the story. It's just to get to that point, to be able to even ask that question, you wonder, how do you do that?
Absolutely. You would think that you'd have to jump through a lot of hoops. And apparently they did, but they made it look really easy.
Oh, man, that's amazing. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the audience.
Right.
Before I do, just a quick reminder, Blu-ray and HD, it's already on digital now, but Wonder, everybody out there, you can pick it up tomorrow. That is 13th. Yeah, right? Is that
I think it's out tomorrow, yes.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
That's why we're here. Let's nail it. Tuesday the 13th, everybody. Tuesday the 13th, you can pick it up on DVD and Blu-ray.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and turn it over to the audience
Sure.
real quick. What do we got? Right here.
First. Hi. I read the book and then saw the movie. So I understood all the characters of the children because they were in the book, but not the parents. Did you have some special input in the screenwriting of that or their direction for the film?
Well, yeah, a little bit. One of the things that Steven did, Steven the director, he asked me to write a sort of a short history of the Pullman family that he could give to Julia and Owen and Jacob and Isabella and Sofia Braga. So that they, on the first day of shooting on set, when they were reading through the script, they would have a sense of who the family is. All the things that I hadn't actually mentioned in the book. I got to kind of, where Isabel and Nate met, how the history of the Pullmans, and both maternal and paternal. And it was a great exercise for me as a writer, and it was really, I think, important for the cast to really kind of be able to sort of relate to one another with like a real history of it. So I got to sort of input on that level. And then in terms of the rapport, some of the dialogue, definitely I had some input. I worked closely with Steven in terms of some of the script writing. He would call me, he was out in California when he was rewriting the shooting script. And he would call me, he was like, "Okay, I have Isabel and Nate, and they're talking about this. What do you think about this?" And he'd read some dialogue, and I'd say, "Well, I think she would say this." And so we'd go back and forth. But I had a lot more input than I ever thought I would.
Steven mentions, too, he's talking about your working relationship and how great a collaborator you are and how great it was to work with you, and says you guys agreed on a lot. And then he also says, but there were times you disagreed as well, sometimes very emphatically so, very much so.
Right.
And I'm curious, do you recall any disagreements that you were then later surprised by? Like, maybe you didn't think this would work, but Steven Stuchter's going to like, trust me, this is going to be great.
It happened a couple of times.
Yeah.
Definitely. The volleyball scene. I remember we were shooting the volley. It's very quick. I mean, I think I was a little bit right too, because his version, he had one scene that went on a little longer where Augie is being pelted by volleyballs, and he's kind of like this, and the boys are like pelting him, and I was like, it's so mean, stop, don't, I can't watch, it made me cringe, and he was like, no, this is good, this is, trust me, and so he kept it in the movie. It is kind of funny in the movie, but he made it much shorter, I think, because of my mom sort of cringy, be nice, kind of thing.
When
yeah.
Jacob saw it was shorter, did he turn around and go, well, why did you hit me for 15 minutes with volleyballs?
Exactly.
If we were only going to use...
I don't know. I mean, Stephen, I think, rightly said, he was kind of, he's like, I get that you are the mama bear of Wonder, but now I am the papa bear. And so we're both, and we came at it that way. I mean, it was very much kind of a husband-wife, like, trust me, he'll be fine, just throw him in the pool. And I was like, no, he needs, that. So it was kind of like that, yeah.
Amazing. 2 more questions. Next one's coming from you right over here.
Hi. I saw an interview on ABC about Nathaniel Newman and how you really had changed his life, and he felt like the story was really about him. When you see this tangible change where schools have one of your books as a mandatory reading, and when you go back to that very first incident of what inspired the book with the girl and the ice cream, do you ever feel like this was really meant to be, or do you still feel like, oh, it's just a coincidence? Like, how do you feel about that?
That's such a well-put question, because I tend to be a bit of a fatalist. I believe in destiny a little bit. I believe that I don't know, maybe I was in the right place at the right time and at the right moment in my life to write this book. The fact that it's impacted, I mean, aside from the movie, aside from getting to hang out with Julia Roberts, aside from all of the wonderful things that this movie has brought me personally, and, even inspiring a generation of kids, that's all amazing. But the number one thing I'm proudest of is the fact that for real-life Augies, like Nathaniel Newman, that it's profoundly impacted their lives. That Nathaniel's dad has told me that, there was a time before Wonder came out that just going to a playground with Nathaniel was like a big deal. Like they just couldn't, it was hard to get around to doing that because it was so difficult. And now, he said, it's just changed so much for them that he'll go to a playground and he'll have people come up to him and say, oh, are you like Augie Pullman? And it makes him kind of cool and it's popular. And like him, there are thousands of kids. There's the My Face organization, there's the Children's Craniofacial organization. They have special editions of Wonder, which they give out to new members. They have parents who, like, if their kids are going to school for the first time, they'll give a copy of Wonder to the principal or to the teacher, just so they can understand or get a little bit of an idea of what it's like. And so for me, honestly, that's the most humbling aspect of all of this stuff that's happened. And yeah, I can't even, it's almost hard to sort of put into words. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Amazing. We have time for one more question, and it's going to come from right over here.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Since there's a lot of bullying in this world with the news and whatnot, what advice would you give to young children of today?
I actually go to schools now, and I'm like, you guys, it's up to you, because I don't even know what to say to them anymore. It's crazy.
I love the idea. We have an inspirational speaker and author here for you today. RJ's coming up. Guys, it's your problem now.
I tell them that I feel like they are so, to use an overused word, they're so woke, this generation. They proceed with such kindness, this generation. And I like to think that Wonder is one aspect of it, or I don't know what it is, but I go to schools all across the country. I've been going to schools and talking to people, from, 3rd grade through high school, and I'm so amazed and impressed by these young people, and I feel like they get it. Yeah. And they get that kindness is something that it's not, I mean, what's going on in the White House right now, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get political, but kindness has been so politicized, it's almost being viewed as a weakness. As somehow if you're kind, you're gullible. And not, it's just the opposite. I mean, and the kids know that. The kids know that it takes courage to be kind. The kids know that we need to be kind only because it's hard. It's harder to be kind than not. And they get that. And so that's why I say to them, look, I know you guys get that. And you guys will, I know you'll vote with kindness when you're old enough to vote with kindness, and I know that you will lead with kindness when you're old enough. My job is to try to get us there. So, and the job of any adult now is to try to just at least let us get to that point where you guys where you guys can take over and make the world right.
Let me ask you this: in a time when a lot of us who don't have the opportunity to tour all the schools and see all the children, is it somewhat easier for you as an individual to be maybe a little more optimistic, seeing these children and seeing what the future does hold versus what we're seeing present day?
Yeah, what we're seeing present day is pretty devastating, and going to the schools has been very therapeutic for me. Because I realize that these are the kids we're fighting for. This is the future we're fighting for, and they make it worthwhile. There are times when I'm sure we're all in the same boat where you just get, I cannot believe we're here. And it's easier to just kind of pull the covers over and say, okay, you know what, wake me up in 4 years or whenever. But you realize it's these kids, it's my kids. I have a 21-year-old and a 14-year-old, and it's like I refuse to just sit down and let this happen. And so let's keep doing what's right and expecting our leaders to do what's right, and then hand over a reasonably sane planet to our children. So that's my hope, and I do feel more optimistic when I speak to kids. So yeah.
Well, to that end, reading this book, watching this film, understanding the story, and seeing the impact it's had on these kids and on kids and adults alike all over the world, it's a beautiful thing. And thank you for writing it. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.
Applaud for sure.
Thank you.
But I'm definitely going to plug this DVD one more time. So before you get out of here, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And to all of those that have not yet seen the film or want to own the film, tomorrow, the 13th, Tuesday 13th, please look for Wonder on Blu-ray and DVD or out on digital right now. Or read the book if you haven't. Do yourself a favor. It's all phenomenal stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. There you go.
Thank you so much.